All right, Doug, it seems like something is afoot in the global money system, specifically the Bretton Woods system. Seems like it's up for reconsideration now. And there's been lots of clues about this for a while, including, the fact that central banks around the world have published research papers essentially on how they might use central bank digital currencies. There was also something, if I remember right, in 2008, the IMF tried to do something with these things called SDRs, their special drawing rights. So there's been a desire to do this for a while, but there's something seems to be happening, really actually happening now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's the final stage in the collapse of the international monetary system, actually. Uh, they basically, at this point, as I understand it, we're dealing with pathological characters here, so I'm not sure I have a total grip on what's really in their warped minds. But essentially, what they're trying to do is to make money completely digital. And of course, there are a couple of places in the world today that really are migrating out of cash so that you don't have bills in your wallet. Basically, if you don't have a smartphone when you go to a restaurant, not even a credit card, a smartphone, you're not going to be able to buy anything, or a store or anything else. And my understanding is Sweden is pretty much digital for currency at this point, and China is moving very much in that direction. So what does this mean? What it means is that if these people, which is to say the IMF and the rest of the global monetary powers that are, get this moving along, all of your financial wealth will be digital, like Bitcoin, except it won't be Bitcoin. It'll be a government version of digital currency, which is similar in that you'll have to use your smartphone to buy and sell, but you won't have any privacy the way you do with Bitcoin. And there will be no limit on the number of Fedcoins that they'll create. And incidentally, it may be true that I'm the person that originated that term, Fedcoin.
I think you did. I think you did, yes.
Yeah, I think I might have. When I did something here in Aspen, which is where I am right now, for Stansberry or Casey Research before I sold, who knows, I can't remember. And I coined that term for what was going to be the government's substitute for Bitcoin, which was going to replace the dollars in your wallet and your credit cards for that matter. So anyway, that'll be lost in the mists of history. Not that it makes any difference, because it's all dust in the wind anyway.
I don't know though, being label it, as soon as you can label something, you give people a way to think about it. So I think credit, of course, doesn't really, continue getting credit for coming up with the terms. But I think if you don't lack the vocabulary for certain things, it's very difficult to wrap your head around it. And so I think when you coined that phrase, it really helped. At first, I think most people thought it was ridiculous when you first said it, and now it seems self-evidently true.
I know. It's like another term I coined, which is the Greater Depression, to define what we're going into for the rest of this decade. And I understand a number of people are trying to appropriate that. I should have patented or copyrighted or trademarked, whatever you do, the term the Greater Depression. Like, who's that ridiculous, phony economist? His name is Nouriel Roubini.
Yeah. Yep.
Like most of these so-called economists, he serves no useful purpose, but he's a pretty good self-promoter. So he's toyed with stealing that phrase without acknowledgement, of course. But I really don't care. I really don't. It's mildly annoying when people appropriate things, but on the other hand, that's the way of the world. So anyway, getting back to digital currencies. It's the best thing since sliced bread as far as the government's concerned, because when the US dollar is digitized and they move out currencies, the $100 bill will be the first to go, and they'll probably keep the 20 just for, like pocket change, the equivalent of coins. And as you know, they're in process of getting rid of coins, little metal coins that we have and they're not coins. That's technically incorrect. You should call them tokens. A coin has some value in itself, apart from the government stamping on it. A token is just like a wooden nickel, which is what they are. They're metal wooden nickels. So the coins are the first to go, because what are any of our coins good for today? Well, absolutely nothing. I mean, a quarter isn't even reusable in a parking meter anymore. I mean,
that's true.
Here in Aspen, of course, this is the weirdest place in the country, this bizarre town. I mean, you have to use a credit card to buy time in a parking meter because it's so expensive. It's like $3 an hour. So who carries 12 quarters around with them? Nobody does that. In fact, when you see a quarter laying on the street, it used to be, if you saw a penny laying on the street, maybe I'll pick it up, maybe I won't. Will I pick up a nickel? No. A dime? No. People don't even pick up quarters when they see them laying on the street anymore. Pretty soon it's going to be dollar bills. They're going to be good. Hundreds are the first to go because miscreants can use them to buy and sell stuff. But they'll probably keep small bills just for trivial purchases. And it will we'll all have to use this digital currency. That's what's happening.
So there's two parts of this, though. One is the transition to the digital currency, which allows everything to be tracked. It also gives the central banks an unusual set of, or totally different set of tools than they have today. So that's one part. But the second part of it is, if this conversation is really just the dominance of the dollar as the global reserve currency, and the renewing or the rethinking of a Bretton Woods agreement essentially is an attack on that dollar hegemony, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Bretton Woods, after World War II, when all of these countries had, except for the United States, had basically destroyed their economies by blowing things up and building things that were completely useless except for war. So they readjusted the monetary system in Bretton Woods. I guess it was 1946 or thereabouts. And basically the US dollar was used as a substitute for gold. The idea was, well, we don't need gold, we'll use the US dollar, because the US dollar is kind of backed by gold at $35 an ounce. And then starting in 1971, the US government defaulted on its promise to redeem dollars held by foreign governments at $35 an ounce. They closed the gold window, as Nixon did. I mean, the guy was a total fraud. And that was just one of the many criminal things that he did. One of the many criminal things that he did. I wonder if he was a worse president than Lyndon Baines Johnson. I mean, they were different. They're different in the way that Hitler and Stalin are different. So, now you can forget about, look, the dollar's on its way to being destroyed. They're creating trillions of them every year, and they'll have to be creating trillions of them per year for the indefinite future to bail out failing corporations, to bail out people that can't pay their mortgages, can't make their car payments, can't pay their rent, can't pay their utilities. I mean, that's all been in abeyance now since this COVID hysteria started. But that can't go on forever because the landlords actually have mortgages and taxes they have to pay. So these people can't live, millions of people can't live rent-free anymore. And so what's going to happen next now that the abeyance of payments on these things is stopping, and now that unemployment is going back up, new unemployment planes are moving upwards. And well, one way they're thinking of doing, of course, is Trump and the Democrats. There's no difference between them from an economic point of view, monetary point of view. they're trying to figure out whether we're going to throw another 2 trillion or 2.2 trillion at the economy, and who's it go to? I guess, so what it's coming down to in the next few years is we're going to be using a digital currency. The paper dollar bill is going out, and you might have your account directly with the Federal Reserve, which, when it's necessary, they will credit you $1,000 here, $1,000 there to stimulate the economy. Or if they don't like you or don't think you're paying your taxes, or whatever the reason might be, they might debit your account or take it away. Like they can today, the federal government can put a freeze on your bank account, freeze on your credit card accounts, and then what do? You have nothing except the cash that you might have squirreled away someplace, or the coins that you search around under the cushion of your couch to feed yourself. But it'll be much more serious. So you're really going to be like a farm animal that they keep at their leisure.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things is to me is just the way that, if I imagine this all from the Fed's perspective and all central banks who really believe that I think they really believe that what they're doing is important and good, and of course I would dispute that completely, but I think that they probably think that, and that right now for them to do what, the tinkering they feel like they need to do within the economy, there's all kinds of things in the way. There's, first of all, the regulations around what the Fed can do, although they violate that all the time. But also they have to do it all through the banking system, and it's just very unwieldy to try and get the banks who are worried about, they're worried about defaults right now since the economy is in shambles. It's and the Fed's trying to get them to loan more money to get more money out there. So with this, they basically completely can circumvent the banks, and they can provide all kinds of weird little incentives, just like the micro targeting of ads on Facebook. They can have micro targeting of interest rates, even for certain people who are not spending enough of their savings. They can have they can charge them essentially for the benefit of having your money on account there. So it's all kinds of crazy stuff that's possible, and I think that they probably look at that and go, well, of course we should be doing these things. It's a good thing for us to be doing this.
Yeah, it's completely nuts. These people control the money system in the United States and the world, and it's insane because money is an objective way of representing your personal life. Your money, which you put aside, represents all the good things you want to have in the future that you save for, good things that you want to provide for other people. Without money, you can't go anyplace, you can't buy anything, you can't do anything without money in an industrialized society. And so you have these people who are basically sociopaths that control the money supply, what it's worth. And now, as they digitize money, as they already have in Sweden and China, among other places, you're completely under their thumb. I mean, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go if you have no money? And you won't have any money if you're an enemy of the state. And you don't know if you're going to become an enemy to the state or a class of people that are considered enemies of the state or not. This is really, really a serious thing, what these idiots are talking about. And of course, the average American, the hoi polloi, the capita-cunci, they go along with it. They think that, people that work for the Federal Reserve and work for the government are on their side and are doing the right thing. They're not. And as we go deeper into the Greater Depression, it's going to get really scary from an economic and financial point of view. Forget about the riots in the streets and the failing, economy. This is going to be the biggest thing, and this is going to be the biggest thing since the founding of the country right now. This is going to be bigger than the Depression and World War II.
The phrase you used is that money is an objective measure of your life, or is that, how did you phrase that again?
Yeah, it's money is congealed life. You
Mm,
spend a good part of your life earning it and saving it and projecting what that money can do for you and others in the future.
mm.
It represents everything, what you can have, where you can go, where you can eat even. So money is the lifeblood of the society. And the fact that these people are manipulating it like this is a monopoly game that they control, I mean, it's really serious. I think that hopefully these people are going to wind up like Mussolini did after World War II.
Mm.
But that's just a fond hope. Fact of the matter is, these people are so totally in control of everything, and the average American is so, been totally bamboozled by his schooling. Chances are better that people like you and I are going to go up against the wall, not them. So,
Uh, I, it's probably true. It's probably true, unfortunately. I want one of the things when you think about money, it's also what's being destroyed in this process is the idea that if money is an objective measurement of your life and a tool for your life, but it's also a way that you um, it's the I guess a objective measurement of the value that you've created in the world, because the way that you get money is by essentially creating value in the world, and the corruption of the monetary system, the way that they've done it, basically, especially is moving toward something. I mean, we're definitely moving toward MMT. I think there's no doubt about that,
no question.
where you get money not for creating value, you get money for some other reason altogether, and
Yeah,
then you got to
you get it for existing. I mean,
right.
what a ridiculous concept. I mean, that somehow everybody thinks, I mean, it's like the government, the idea of government itself has turned into a giant circle jerk where everybody thinks they can live at the expense of everybody else.
Mhm.
It's very corrupting and it doesn't work. And especially in a highly urbanized society like we live in today, if people don't have their money and they find that food doesn't magically appear down at the Safeway every week, and if it does, they don't have money to buy it. Uh, Listen, this can be catastrophic. There have been times in the past when there have been riots and civil upsets and so forth. But in those days, if you could get a hold of some gold or silver coins and keep them to yourself, well, you had something of value that was tradable. But now that you won't even have paper currency, forget about these worthless little tokens, quarters, and all that. All you got is what's digitally on your cell phone in the future. And this is coming very rapidly. It's explosive, potentially explosive.
Hmm. Do you think that, I
For
mean,
people
it does,
unemployed, and we're gonna find out there's about 160 million economic aged people in the US. People in between roughly 18 and 60, about
hmm,
160 million economic players in the economy, of which right now about 30 million are not working, that are collecting federal welfare, which is ended kind of, but they're going to start it up again, or state unemployment, or something like that. Social Security disability, one
mhm.
scammer, another like that. So what is that? We're talking about not 8% or 9%, whatever unemployment these ridiculous figures are that they come up with, which are about as worthwhile as the figures the Argentine government comes up with. It's actually more like 18 or 20% unemployment,
Huh.
and it's going higher, and it's going to get more serious. So right now, we're just in a lull in the storm where people listen to the talking heads on TV and they say, oh, things are getting better. We're coming out of the COVID crisis. Not true.
Hmm.
Anyway, I hope I have to eat my words with a fork and spoon because I like good times better than bad times. But it's gonna get scary.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And I think, if you have so many people who are not active in the economy, are just basically getting money for without creating any value. I mean, I don't see how that doesn't lead to just crazy runaway inflation, because of the fact that you have fewer, who's going to be producing goods? Like, I mean, we do consume things, and it seems like if there's no one working to do anything, there's no one, unless we're relying on the Chinese or the Vietnamese and the Indians, others basically to produce stuff for us. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like inflation's going to run away.
Yeah, well, those Chinese and Japanese and Indians and Germans, they're very nice folks. For decades now, we've printed up money called dollars, and we ship them, paper dollars or digital dollars, and they ship us Mercedes and Sonys. I mean, that's a hell of a good trade. So now there's, who knows how many, 30, 40 trillion are the numbers that I've heard. Nobody knows. US dollars outside the US. And they're like a ticking time bomb because foreigners don't have to hold on to US dollars. And at one point soon, when they see that they're hot potatoes, that we're creating trillions and trillions of them promiscuously, they're going to start dumping those dollars. But where? Well, they'll come back to the US. And what will they do with them? They're going to trade their trillions of dollars that are outside the US for goods inside the US, land and shares and computers and Boeings. Well, forget about the Boeings. We got enough Boeings to last for the next decade now with what's going on in the airline industry. So all those dollars are going to come back to the US, and domestic prices are going to explode. And meanwhile, the real wealth of the country will be owned by, not by people at home have US government ID, but are sporting Chinese and German government IDs. And Americans, as nationalistic as they are, won't like that very much. So we'll find where Americans will turn out from being the conquering heroes to being serfs in their own country. That's before the US breaks up into smaller countries, which is also in the cards. I know it sounds insane, sounds ridiculous. People think I'm smoking something for saying that, but that's the next step. People in the red counties and the blue counties hate each other at this point. It's irreconcilable, I think. So yeah, the US will break up, should break up, unless one group or another gets control of Washington, DC, and decides to suppress the other group to keep the country together, like what happened in the war between the states, 61.
If it's allowed to organically unfold, it would seem like you would naturally balkanize, I guess. The U.S. would naturally, break off into more related parts. But yeah, if the government suppresses it, that'll be a problem. What do you think about? I mean, what do you think the catalyst will be for the dollars, though, to start returning to the U.S.? Because it makes me, I was always wondering. It's a faith thing, I understand, but it does seem like the reworking of a Bretton Woods agreement could be the catalyst for it, because right now, the countries around the world, they have to, settle transactions in dollars. Chinese want to buy oil from the Saudis. They both have to use dollars for it. And so that's probably the strongest reason for them to hold dollars, is just to basically engage in that international trade. But if they have a different solution, then it seems like I don't know why they wouldn't just abandon it in droves almost immediately.
That's right. I'm afraid they're going to have to go back to gold, because nobody wants to use Saudi riyals. You can't trust that any more than the dollar. Nobody wants to use Chinese yuan. I mean, nobody wants to use Russian rubles. They don't trust each other. So right now, all these countries have to trade using US dollars. But the US is their adversary, maybe their enemy. And it all has to clear through New York. Very dangerous for countries other than the US. So they're going to go to gold because they don't trust each other. And why should they? I mean, they're basically, all the governments of the world are run by criminals. I mean, that's just a fact. Yeah, so we're going back to gold. So even with gold now at 1900 or 2000 an ounce, whatever, it's going higher. It's going higher. And anyway, it's important because it's the only way you can save money, and it is money. Gold is money, not currency. Government substitute for money. So yeah, everybody listening to this should be buying gold, even at $2,000 an ounce. Hey, listen, I feel bad about it. I've been buying it since it was $35 an ounce, and I've never sold an ounce, okay? So I don't need to buy any more, but I don't want to hold on to dollars either. I mean, that's a real hot potato.
Right. And would you, and we talked a little bit about this before with Bitcoin and gold, that they kind of serve, they're similar in their properties potentially for the future, right? I guess what's your view on, I know we talked about it a little bit before, but what's, for people who didn't watch that, what's your view on the relative benefits of Bitcoin as compared to gold, or vice versa?
Well, I was a late adopter to Bitcoin, of course, because using Aristotle's 5 characteristics of a good money, I saw, yeah, it's convenient, it's durable, it's divisible, it's convenient, consistent, but did it have value? So Bitcoin's main value is as a transfer mechanism, and at least for the time being, a private way, because it's pretty private, a way to hold debt outside of the dollar and to get out of the banking system. So that's its value proposition. That's why it's not like, paper money, which has really none of those things, or digital money, which is even worse, government digital money, I should say. Right. So yeah, I'm bullish on Bitcoin. I know it's about $10,000 a Bitcoin now, but it's going higher. And I'm told by people that go into these things that actually Monero could turn out to be Bitcoin dot 2.0. It's more private and so forth and so on. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Bitcoin is, was the first kid on the block. Everybody uses it. Not everybody uses Monero. Right. But I know that the dollar is rapidly turning into toilet paper.
There was some that recently where the regulations were altered that essentially allow, banks to take custody of digital assets. Before it was not, ever something that they could carry on their balance sheet, but apparently there's been some regulatory changes by the Fed that it basically allows them to do that. And I think that's pretty bullish for Bitcoin.
Well, that's right. And don't forget what happened in Cyprus 4 or 5 years ago when all the banks in Cyprus were bankrupt. I mean, if you went down to a Cypriot bank and you wanted your Cypriot drachmas, I forget what they were using, it's academic, and you asked them for it, the bank didn't have it. It had made stupid loans and it was out there and they couldn't redeem their. So what happened? Instead of a bailout from the Cyprus government, it was a bail-in where anybody that had an account with a Cypriot bank for over 100,000 euros lost all or part of their money. They just took it. They honored the part for the small people with under 100,000 euros because that was theoretically insured. Their insurance is worthless anyway. I mean, it's just it's made up. But the same thing could happen here in the US. So it's very dangerous keeping money in European or American banks at this point above the insured amounts. It's all funny money. So
it also seems like
not bailouts.
Bail-ins are, it's pretty frightening, the idea of that. And I guess it's like, that's what the FDIC insurance is supposed to prevent, right? Is these banks that collapse and people lose all of their savings. But the truth is, at some point, it has to collapse. These things are just so.
Your FDIC insurance is what we call the sticker principle. So that you put a sticker on the door, it says, you're insured, don't worry about it. And that'll keep people from making a run on the bank thinking that I better get my money before the other guy gets his. It's all a fiction. And
all for show.
It's all for show. And the FDIC is fine for an isolated bank failure here or there. Yeah, they can do that. But the problem is systemic. It's not just some individual bank where the directors were frauds or idiots. This is systemic across all the banks.
Well, it also seems like no matter what, if the central banks go to this central bank digital currency, it disintermediates the banks. So the banks, their whole line of business doesn't really work anymore. The need for them in the system doesn't really matter anymore because your account is directly with the Fed. Right?
Yeah, that's correct. So what useful purpose will the banks serve? Well, they've got many hundreds of thousands of employees that are, making loans and mortgages and, kind of shuffling paper around. So I don't think the Fed is going to abolish the banks. It's just going to be like the mother hen with the little chicks under it for convenience purposes.
Hmm.
So they'll work out something like that. Yeah.
A form of almost of pseudo nationalization of the banks, where they still operate as independent franchises, essentially, of the Fed, but they're really, you'd have to assume that if there's a transition from from US dollar to a Fed coin, they'd have to, that all of their assets and liabilities eventually have to shift over to the Fed, most likely.
Yeah. The bankers, today's bankers will basically turn into like, you know, administrators. They'll collect the mortgage when you pay it and, do the detail work and all that. And the important stuff will be done by the Fed. And you'll have your own account with the Fed in addition, unless you, have a credit card, which will not exist in the future, or a mortgage, or a lease payment on your truck or something like that. That'll all go through the bank still. Fed doesn't want to mess with that little stuff. Yeah, but
Okay.
it's all gonna change. I wouldn't want to own a bank stock right now, among other things. The only kind of stocks that I really want to own right now are gold mining stocks, quite frankly.
So kind of a long gold miner, short banks sort of play.
I think that that's going to work out really well. I mean, it's worked out really well for me over the last few years. And since the public is not involved in any way in gold stocks today, or gold for that matter, and fund managers are totally out of gold stocks. They don't even know they exist. They're all going to they're going to see that these producing gold companies are coining money today. They're ultra profitable. I mean, the average of a producing cost for producing gold miners today is about $1,000 per ounce, all in, all costs, including replacing reserves and everything. But gold is selling for about twice that much. So, I mean, they're just coining money. And fund managers, especially when the regular stock market starts rolling over, and it could at any time, I'm not saying it will, because as long as the Fed creating money, it's still going to flow into the stock market. So I don't know when it's going to roll over. But yeah, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Here's another patented phrase that, somebody can, it's going to be like trying to get the contents of Hoover Dam through a garden hose. That's what's going to happen with gold stocks.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what would you estimate the time frame is? And I know it's very hard to predict these things, but it does seem like things are moving much, much faster than they were 12 months ago with the central bank digital currencies, and we're reconsidering Brenton Woods, all that. Like, what time frame roughly? Just a guess. I know.
I'd say anytime in between tomorrow morning and 6 months from now, it's really going to hit the fan, because people have been excused on paying their mortgages and their rent and a lot of other things now since this COVID hysteria slammed on the economy. And okay, now what are they going to do? So I'd say we're really looking into the abyss right now. You're standing right at the edge of the abyss, and the pebbles are falling out from under your toes. So I think we're very close. This is exciting stuff, but only exciting because it's scary. That's the kind of exciting we don't really like so much. Scary.
No, but but I mean, I saw this really interesting data point. I guess it was probably only through the end of June, but it showed on subprime auto loans that the delinquency rate had like the lowest delinquency rate it had in, I don't know, I mean, it was several years, I think since like 2012. So and I know that that's because of the money that was pouring out, the government basically, where the people were making more than they were making more not working than working. But I mean, it seems like they're going to try and put more of the stimulus money out there that basically is going to allow people to keep rolling things over longer, keep making their payments. But if they don't, then the defaults will get crazy and things could really start to collapse pretty quickly. But
Well, and you don't want to have your car repoed because a lot of people that have cars are going to want to keep them because after they lose their house or their apartment, they're otherwise going to be living under a bridge.
right.
So the last thing that you want to not pay on is your car.
That's true. And there weren't more, there's been the moratorium on foreclosures and evictions. So I guess if people are, they were sort of excused from having to pay those bills. And, so they had extra capital anyway to pay for their cars.
Do they ever
But
talk about this particular problem? And of course, the fact that utilities have been, how are people going to pay their utility bills? Because the utility companies actually have expenses like buying coal and oil and paying their workers. So how's that going to work? I mean, this is, do they talk about this on the TV at all? Do the talking heads address this problem?
the only time I hear them talk about the eviction issue, I do hear them sometimes talk about eviction, and it's a foregone conclusion in their conversation that delaying evictions is a good thing. Like that, so they start off from that basis point, and they talk about the legislation that's going through, and and delaying things. And I think the CDC a couple of months ago, maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago, basically issued some proclamation that forbade people from evicting people because of COVID, who might have been affected by COVID in some way. So the CDC apparently somehow has the authority to prevent evictions of a certain category. So, but everyone that I've heard thinks this is all a good thing. It's providing relief to people, but I guess they're just not understanding the upstream or downstream effects of all that.
Yeah, well, the downstream effects of it are that I'm going to be in a secure location with my widescreen, watching it on my widescreen instead of with I don't want to listen to the audio because the comments that these people make are so stupid that they're just annoying. So I'm going to turn on the Rolling Stones Street Fighting Man and listen to it on continuous loop as I watch the riots on my widescreen. That's the way I see it. We'll see what actually happens.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it at that for today. On that
Okay.
happy note. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it.